Welcome back to Ultra Uncovered. I'm Corinne Shalvoy, one of your co-hosts, and this is just a little introduction to today's episode. This episode was recorded on March 24th, and just a caveat, if you have not seen the film, The Chase, we do discuss it quite a bit in this episode. This is a great companion pod to the film, and you could listen to it before you go see the film to get you excited about it, or you could listen to it afterwards if you do not want to hear some of the storylines or what happens in the race that is detailed in the film. We would suggest that you listen to it afterwards. But wanted to introduce the topics that we cover. We speak with the incredible Arlen Glick in this podcast. It was a very thought-provoking and philosophical discussion. We cover Arlen's thoughts on, of course, Cocodona. We do a lot on that. His preparation and strategy for the race in 2024, his race reflections. We talk about the course and diversity of the terrain in Cocodona, his previous experience in Arizona, why he called Cocodona a bizarre experience. We discuss his sleep strategy during the race and reflections on his performance and lessons learned. In addition to this, we do some deep dives on the film itself. As mentioned, you may want to, listen to this before or after, depending on if you want a spoiler. And we also get into a little bit about just what's going on with Arlen, what's been happening in the last year or so. We talk about his thoughts on the Hard Rock 100 because I was particularly interested in that, and just catch up with him and a lot more. So we think it's an amazing talk, and we're really appreciative of Arlen's time spent and all of his insights. I think that if you're considering doing Cocodona or you are crewing or pacing someone, this is definitely a must listen. So enjoy the episode. Final request is for you to give us a rating and a 5-star review on your podcast player or on YouTube, so that we can help continue sharing these excellent episodes and our amazing guests with others in the community. Thank you.
Joined as always by co-host Corinne Shalvoy. And today we've got a special episode for you in our continued series to run down the Cocodona 250. We've got a great competitor from the 2024 race, Arlen Glick. Thank you so much for being on the podcast and welcome.
Thanks a lot for having me here. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, Arlen. So I've gotten to know you a little bit over the last couple of years, and I think I'll start with just a really funny story. You may remember this, but we were both at the depletion mile after the 2023 Hard Rock 100.
We'll never forget.
I'll never forget. What happened during that depletion mile, Arlen? What's your side of this story?
It's one of those things. I've never done anything that would compare with that. Running, in case people don't know what that is, it's every year after the Hard Rock 100, they line up on the track. Is it the next day? I mean, it depends when you finish. Basically,
it's technically before the cutoff, right, of the whole race.
Yeah, you're probably right. It would be right before the cutoff. So for me, I had been done for about 24 hours. So I ran for 26 hours or whatever. Was done for 24 hours ish, and then lined up for an all-out mile on the track. And to me, what I remember being so difficult about it, I would have expected my legs to be fried, which they were. But then, I would have expected the muscle soreness and all that. But Silverton's at around 10,000 feet.
Yeah.
And I just remember just gasping for air and realizing this might be low relative to what I ran over the last 24 hours, but it's still extremely hard to run a fast mile on the track with no oxygen after of course, with respect to what I had been through over the past 48 hours.
Yeah, well, I will just say that I didn't run Hard Rock. I did some commentary, but I had fairly fresh legs, and I think we got to the third lap, and we were kind of running together, and I'm like, are you gonna kick Arlen? And he's like, you're like, heck yeah, I'm gonna kick. And then you managed to outkick me on fresh legs after having just run the Hard Rock 100. And so I think that shows the true depth of your competitiveness and your talent in running. So I will never forget. I think it's my claim to fame that I was beat by Arlen Glick in the Hard Rock 100 mile depletion mile.
Yeah, I do remember that moment because I was kind of like, I didn't win the depletion mile. Okay, so fair enough. I didn't win the whole thing. Okay,
You
but I
did
do
pretty
remember
good
that.
though.
I do remember that last lap, and I honestly was lacking motivation because I was hurting a lot more than I was showing. I might have been laughing and joking, but I was hurting pretty bad. And I remember when you came up beside me, and I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, let's race." Like if
Let's just be clear.
newfound motivation.
I think you ran like a low to mid 6 minute mile. You know, that's pretty insane. So, congratulations. I know it was one of the biggest victories of your career to beat me. Just kidding. But I had to start with that story because it's funny. And one question about Hard Rock before we get into the Cocodona specific stuff. I've kind of just always wanted to ask you this. What did you think of Hard Rock from a course standpoint? Was it what you expected? I don't know how much you had actually trained out there before. And I know everyone asks you, how do you run these mountainous hundreds coming from where you live? And so we're not going to ask you that question, but I'm curious about Hard Rock specifically. Like, what did you think of it? The course.
Yeah, I mean, it was stunning. Like the views are stunning there. As far as the difficulty, the altitude is obviously the big one. That one's I think everybody knows about that. Um, I think as far as the race experience, it's just they took a like I think Hard Rock took a time in ultra running history and froze it very well. And while it's maybe, there will never be another, we have no need for another Hard Rock, but it was a very special event. If you're fortunate enough to be one of those who finds yourself at the start line, you'll never appreciate it until unless you've got to experience that. Um, yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's extremely challenging. For me, it was challenging in a lot of ways. I spent 2 weeks before, which was basically taper. But little reminder, I did Western States that year, which was just less than 3 weeks before that. So I didn't have fresh enough legs and whatever. I was there kind of for taper. So I didn't get to explore a lot of the chorus, but I did get to see the stunning views and to really take it in. But yeah, it is hard. It's a different kind of hard.
Well, and Arlen, I think you've
Yeah.
redefined yourself as a mountain athlete, a great endurance athlete. You're not a you are a flat, fast 100-mile runner as well. But I think that, given some of the things the challenges that you've taken on, you've just now got this reputation as just a great endurance athlete. And so I'm curious, before we get into some of the Cocodona stuff, how is your year going so far? I know I see the craft a kit right there. And I know that the craft team was out in Italy recently, and I saw some pictures with you out there as well. So could you just give us a quick update of how you're doing right now and what things have you motivated right now and what you're looking forward to for 2025?
Yeah, I mean, for me, we may to define this year, we probably would almost need to back up to like Cocodona last year, because going into Cocodona, like I had surgery scheduled a couple months before, well, scheduled for right after Cocodona. So yeah, I had ACL reconstructive surgery done to correct a problem that's, I guess, I basically always had in my ultra running life, always had. Um, so like that right now we're still like working through the details of trying to and like the build back from that. Obviously trying to get me in race shape as soon as the body is cooperating with me. But yeah, everything kind of pivots around that recovery and build back. I don't want to get too
For sure.
excited about racing yet because I'm still have to be very patient with the whole process.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what has consumed the last almost year of my life. So anyway, that's where things are at right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I heard you say you'd run what 300,000 miles. What'd you say? How many?
30,000,
30,000, not quite
30,000.
30,000 miles without an ACL. And so it's going to be an exciting journey to see how you do with, you know, a brand new.
If you can do that on the ACL
knee,
that you had,
right?
think of what you'll be able to do on a reconstructed ACL.
Yeah, that's what I think it was. I think it was a nice set of circumstances that I was sort of known as the fast, flat 100-mile guy. But then there was no hiccup moving to the mountain scene. And then I, thrived there for a couple years. And then when everyone found out that I've always been running with a torn ACL, they were all like, wait, no, we were just getting used to the fact that you can run technical terrain really well. And now and now we find out that you've been doing that on one leg.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. That's a pretty wild story. Well, glad that you're in the healing process and doing all the PT and getting back to running. And I know everyone will be very excited when you are able to line up again. So let's shift a little bit to Cocodona. I was telling you offline, I had the pleasure of watching The Chase, the fabulous movie by Dylan Harris that is currently on film tour right now. Bunch of us from Castle Rock will be going to the Colorado Springs show tomorrow, March 25th. And it is a really, like, I'm not going to say too much about it because Russ hasn't seen it yet, but it's excellent. And it was awesome to just get to know, each of the characters of the film in so much depth and kind of your backgrounds and then how different you all are, but how the same you are in your pursuit of this one goal. So I really enjoyed it. I was actually at Cocodona as well, doing some commentary. One question to start out with is that, I've met you a few times and I saw you at mile 242 up at the top of Eldon.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Believe it or not,
I can't believe you remember that. There's no way I'd remember that. And you were firmly in third place at that point, which, we can go into how you felt about your result if you want to. But all I remember is that you were like extremely positive, happy, just the best attitude. And you sat down and had stood up and ate almost a full meal of multiple offerings of Pete Mortimer's meats before, proceeding to run the last 8 miles of the race. And so I'm just really curious, is it intentional that you try to maintain this positive mindset? Does that come naturally? Oh, how do you do that in the midst of so much exhaustion, pain, or whatever's going on in these races, especially something like 240 miles deep into Cocodona?
Wow. I'm glad that you, rather than just asking that question, gave me already some context, because I don't want to spoil the movie. We're gonna like, I don't know when this is gonna be released, but when I came in and ate a whole meal I had just been crushed. So like, I thought I was going to win Cocodona for all of that third day. Thus the name of the chase got the name because of my mental state of the last day of Cocodona. So I finished around 7 p.m. or something. So from 3 a.m. I think I took a nap from 2 to 3 a.m. So from 3 a.m. to 6 p.m. or whatever, I believed I was going to win that race. So when I got to the top, that's when I realized that I had got word that they were basically done. So I was not going to catch what I had been chasing. And I had just had like the biggest crush of and then and then you're up there like serving us this amazing food, and that was my little I don't know why you thought I was in such a had such a positive attitude. Like I was eating because I had just been crushed and like had nothing to prove. It was like I conceded my race right there at the top of Mount Eldon, and the reason I ate a whole meal was because I was just that, you know, how do people call it, like calories when they're with therapy calories?
A little bit of
Uh,
emotional eating.
yeah, like that's so funny that you thought I was in such a good mood because I don't know. I thought I was like completely crushed at that point.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you may have been crushed, but it wasn't visible to people around you. And I think that that's one thing that's I don't know. I think it's just really admirable because I see, a lot of people respond not like that when they're in those scenarios. Some of us cry, some of us get angry, some people get, just super grumpy and they're not nice to other people. And like, I don't know, if it's just the natural stress response of people and how that's different. But for what it's worth, you're very kind, you're very grateful and just pretty easy and nice to be around, even in that state that you were in, which I think speaks a lot to your character.
Oh, well, thank you. You're so way too kind. But yeah, I think like I think it's important to have gratitude no matter where you find yourself. Like for me, maybe that was the most crushing moment that I've had in who knows how long. But like at the end of the day, at the end of the race, like I still had a great race. Um, it was just that moment was very crushing. So I'm glad if it appeared like I had gratitude in the middle of a very
Arlen,
crushing.
your baseline
It did.
kindness is just so much higher. So even when you're a little bit low, you're still at a baseline high level of kindness. I'm curious, Arlen. You put a lot into the 2024 Cocodona race in terms of your preparations too, and I'm curious if you could just talk a little bit about how you were thinking about this race in relation to maybe other 100-mile long races or other things that you would tackle. Like, why was it with Cocodona that you felt so compelled to be out on course early and to spend that time and energy out there in preparation for it?
Yeah, there was a lot of reasons for my preparation. One was for the experience. I love Arizona. As you know, you don't run one step of that race twice, or one step of that course twice. So you're going to see half of it roughly in the day and half of it at night. So one purpose for that was to experience the whole chorus. I did a bunch of point-to-point runs with, and I took my gravel bike out. I did a bunch of point-to-point runs and then rode my bike back. Um, so one reason was to experience the chorus. And you know how it is. A lot of people show up to get acclimated or whatever they want to call it, like a week, maybe 2 weeks before their race. Well, we all know that from a training standpoint, that's not that beneficial because you're tapering. So, ideally, if you want to really soak up something, I feel like you need to be there about 5 weeks ahead of time, so that you can train. You can do a good training block. And it doesn't have to be that way from a performance standpoint. You can show up the day of the race and perform well. That's been proven. But from an experience standpoint, with a race that has that much dynamic to it, uh, yeah, that was the probably the main reason was for the experience, and also like I knew something that nobody else knew, and that was going to be my last race for a long time, and so I knew that was my Hail Mary, even if nobody else did.
Mhm.
And so I wanted to attack it from not just from a racing standpoint that I'm going to leave it on empty, but from a training standpoint that I'm investing everything that am worth and going to be worth over the next year or two into this one event. So I kind of just, yeah, turned myself loose to just live and thrive and just like eat, sleep, and dream Cocodona for 6 weeks.
Were you surprised about the diversity on the
That's
course
awesome.
in terms of the terrain and things like that? That's one thing that I think that people don't understand. It's like, yes, it's a race in Arizona, but you can't describe Cocodona by one type of terrain.
Yeah, I wouldn't say surprised, because I know Arizona. It's one of my favorite places to live and train. So maybe surprised is not the word, but yes, diverse. Well, for one thing, anytime you string together a 250-mile
Point to
course,
point.
It'd be diverse.
you're gonna have a bunch of miles that are just simply for the purpose of connecting really cool trail. So yeah, like I can remember sliding down some places and just being like, I had a new fear, of course, once I discovered that I've had torn ACL for a long time. That and there were so many points where I was like, this is totally not safe, totally not recommended in my state right now. But like we're in this. So just embracing it. Like I can remember sliding down on my butt down from like uh Jerome, that section that's so steep and no trail, and you just like, yeah. Um, but wow, it connects. Like I like to look at it, it's basically three different experiences in terms of the chorus. The first day through the Bradshaw Mountains looks absolutely nothing like uh Sedona. And then you have I would say the second day, if you're running my pace, it was like the first day was the Bradshaw Mountains. Then the first night, you kind of go up over Mingus. And then the second day is all of like Cottonwood and Sedona, which looks like a
Mars.
completely different planet. And then the third day, then, yeah, it's hard, it's hot. And then the third day is like you spend in the Flagstaff area, um, which is completely different again. Like it looks like a completely different planet up there in Flagstaff. So it's a very diverse experience.
So what is your previous Arizona experience been? I didn't realize. Had you lived in Arizona previously?
I've spent time here and there. I ran Javelina a couple times. I was out there last year during Cocodona.
That's right.
Just training
Okay.
for Western States. I actually
You volunteered a bunch,
I
didn't
did
you?
volunteer there.
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
It was one of the hardest things to go home from was my 8 hours of volunteering there in Sedona, because like I just absolutely thrived in that environment.
Did you learn some things from that volunteer experience of seeing other runners come through?
I took people, drove them in my car to the hotel for
Okay.
them to sleep off their problems and hopefully come back the next day.
Wow.
That will change your life. It
Yeah.
So yeah, I learned a few things. I learned a lot about patience. I was in Sedona on maybe day 3 of the race or something, so it was a very busy time,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just, yeah, very life-changing. Warning all the runners about that next section that they're going to go through. Like I remember being informed that it took our leader that year 8 hours to run that section. So I was like telling everyone as they're going into this section, like, our leader, it just took him, 8 hours for this section. Like, take care of yourself, make sure you have everything you need to stay warm for day, night, or whatever you're going to experience. Things like that, when you're preaching at first, then you definitely are a lot more prepared from a mental standpoint to
Yeah.
tackle it yourself.
That's crazy. I mean, yeah, look at what we saw happen with Mika Thews, right? Of last year leaving the course, coming back. We didn't know what was going on, and she slept for 8 hours and got back on course.
Yeah, it's amazing to me where the 100-mile distance in our sport right now has had so many improvements that it's become a different event. But it's really fun because we have not got the 200s plus figured out yet. And it takes us back in time to what 100-mile races used to be. And it's a really fun place to experience and explore.
That's awesome. So I want to go back to something you alluded to that I also heard in, I think, a previous podcast you were on, that you inspired the name of the movie, The Chase. So tell us a little bit about kind of how that came to be, or the story of like how that developed.
Yeah, I mean, there again, I guess this part of the movie is not actually part of the movie. It's just the name of the movie. So maybe I can talk a little bit about like how the name, where the name came from.
That'd be great.
And there are so many different levels that the movie, that name fits the movie for.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as you know, the race results, like Harry
Yep.
won.
Yep.
He chased down Jeff and passed him just a couple miles from the finish line. But where the name came from, we worked with Dylan Harris for a lot through this project. Dylan came to my house, filmed me training. So we knew each other pretty well at this point. And he texted me the morning after I finished Cocodona and was like, "Hey, can we do the post-race interview?" And I'm like, my voice is kind of gone. I am really tattered right now. He's like, "Actually, that's kind of what I had in mind, was
Raw.
just getting the raw footage of what it's like." And in the interview, I maybe maybe I was all shined up just like a penny and everything looked okay, but I was still wrecked. And it was interesting because I talk about being crushed at the top of Eldon. But like, if you recall, right, and maybe I can spoil this part because it's actually like part of this is in the trailer, so you can actually kind of see this part of the movie. But it's that moment where it actually really started to settle in right during that post-race interview, and I got really emotional, which I don't usually do. That's probably the only interview where I ever, basically broke down and cried during the interview. And for me, it was just crazy because I had been through, I don't know how to describe it, but so much shock and so much over the past 3 days with like no sleep. So maybe I was smiling and happy at the top of Eldon, but I don't think it actually, like, the fact of getting defeated like that hadn't sunk in until that post race interview. And then all of a sudden it just hit me like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
And I just said, there was a comment, there was a statement there that I had chased for something all day that I wasn't going to catch. And when I said that, Dylan was sitting there. And remember, he had about as much sleep as I had over the past 3 days. So he was in a similar state to me where he's like a little delusional. But he goes, "Oh my." He goes, "I think you just named the movie." He's like, "We've been looking for a name. We've been hoping, but you can't name you can't name a movie before you don't name a child before it's born. You don't name a movie until you know what happened, until you know the story." And he's like, "You just named the movie. That is the perfect fit." So it's going to be The Chase. Anyhow, and true, it stood true to this day that would become the name of the movie.
Yeah.
And it is funny
It's a
because it was
great
like
name.
a very spontaneous and a very emotional, a very emotional experience that named that movie. That's just the way I described it, in a state where it was all hit, the reality had finally sunk in
Yeah,
to
you
me.
compare it to like trail names, right? You can't give yourself your own trail name; it has to be given to you. So the inspiration for the movie name couldn't have come from Dylan; it had to have come from some other communication or something else. Now, you said something else there, Arlen, that I'm not going to let pass. You said you can't name a child until after they're born. I named all my kids before they were born. So tell me a little bit about this. In your family, are kids not named until after they're born?
No, I feel like parents probably always sort of have this name picked, not always, but almost always sort of have this name picked out. But I guess maybe that was a really poor parallel there because, yeah,
The
truly
two
most
parents
parents.
here.
Well, it's probably because parents like they want to name the kid what they want it to become. Where in this case, you kind of naming a movie, you got to wait until you see what you got to name it. Maybe
I
we should
do
wait
know
till kids are like 3 years old to name them.
3 years old. I have friends who have waited until they're born. I did not. But the irony of all of this is that my youngest son is named Dash and he's not a runner. He doesn't really like running. So even though I named him a runner name, he's a basketball player at this point in his
Stowe
life.
likes
Who knows?
skiing though,
It might
so
evolve.
that you
But
got that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, Stowe's the runner, named after a ski area, which is,
Yeah,
ironic.
another plug to my philosophy that we should wait to name kids.
You're right. Why didn't I consult with you before having children here, Arlen?
Yeah.
Okay, so going back to, I've also heard, Arlen, I've heard you describe Cocodona as a bizarre experience. So I'd love to hear you expand on that a little bit. And what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so for me, I've kind of been there, done that. Okay, I ran over 20 100-mile races before I towed the line at Cocodona. And clearly I was taking this race as aggressively as I had the right to do. Like I said, it was my Hail Mary before surgery. So I think when you come at it from a competitive standpoint, from an all-out race standpoint, it has a lot more potential when it comes to being bizarre. For me, it was throwing a bunch of new challenges my way. I had never tried to sleep during a race, and I knew that that was inevitable. Um, I think in terms of like the weather and what you're going to experience, how Mother Nature is going to teach you out there. Um, I mean, I had a coyote, or actually, if you're from the Southwest, you got to call it a coyote, right? So I had a coyote stalking me during Cocodona. And I knew people wouldn't believe me if I told them this. So I actually pulled my phone out because I had my phone with me during Cocodona. And I videoed, and so you couldn't see the coyote, but you could hear him like following
Were
me
you
and
by
barking.
yourself?
Yeah, I was all by myself. This was like before going up Mingus. It would have been right before I went to sleep the first night. Had my little 30-minute nap. But there was a coyote chasing me and barking at me and just following me through the cow pasture. And I don't know why it happened during Cocodona. Like I've ran through the night before, but that's just like one more incidence of.
So was
what
that
made it
exhilarating
bizarre.
for you? Was there a like a stroke of like fear of like, I don't know if this is good right now? Were you alone at the time? Tell us more about this experience.
Yeah, I was alone because I didn't have any pacers until I want to say like Cottonwood, somewhere in that area, like 130, 140 miles, somewhere in that area. So I was alone, and I have very little fear of Mother Nature. Animals, I'm pretty comfortable around them. If you know what my bedroom looks like, animals usually don't freak me out. I was a little nervous just because, like, I hunt coyotes all the time. They're usually very shy. Usually they get spooked very easily by humans, for good reason if they're hanging around me. But in that scenario, I was a little nervous because I felt like this was not
Not
true
that
to character
scenario, right?
for
Yeah.
a.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I was all alone. It was a little bit unnerving, but I just felt like if I kept my light shining in that direction, um, I could at least sort of half blind the thing, and maybe that would give me the upper hand if I had to get physical with it. But I was a little
You
nervous.
mentioned this is the first race that you've ever had to consider like a sleep strategy, right? And also you mentioned driving people to a hotel where they're going to get theoretically a decent amount of sleep. It's amazing to me that an event like this can be an experience like that for you, where you are taking a short rest and maximizing your opportunity for performance. And at the same time, at the other end of the spectrum, people are taking 5 days to do this and taking it as an experience in that respect. So talk a little bit about your sleep schedule, and then maybe just overall as an event, like how that impacts, people's performance. You drove them to a hotel. You didn't know whether or not they're going to come back or not.
Yeah, well, I like to look at sleep during a race because a lot of people can't comprehend that, like what sleep during a race. That's just like not something you think about. But no matter who you are and what approach you're taking, sleep is a tool, not not a luxury during Cocodona. Like it's not a luxury. It is a tool. So my tool of sleep was used extremely effectively. I was advised by a lot of people that have not nailed the sleep thing. They have a hard time falling asleep. Like they'll be falling asleep running and then they lay down and they can't fall asleep. So I went into it and then I was just like so confident that I'm going to make this work. So I tried to go without caffeine as much as possible, unless it was after I had slept, so that it would keep me awake. And that way caffeine would work if I needed it to, and it would not impair me from being able to sleep. So night one, I took, I think it was 20 minutes I slept, and then my crew woke me up and I said, give me 15 more minutes. So I ended up having like 35 minutes the first night. The second day I ended up trying to sleep. I slept for about 15 minutes, just because things were not going well. The second night is when sleep changed my life and the way I viewed sleep completely. I had a horrible second day of Cocodona. Was just zapped, and in hindsight, without slamming a certain energy brand, fuel brand, I have a lot more information now than I did then, but I know now that I was extremely underfueled. And so, but at the time, that was out of the picture. I thought I was getting plenty of fuel. Anyway, so sleep did definitely change. Like my whole perspective on sleep changed the second night. I had a horrible second day. There's this long section between Sedona, this mile 160, and then like Schnebly Hill Road, which is what, like 180-ish or whatever. A very difficult section. I went into that just dragging, and it was still, I went into that section while it was still day. And so it was extremely difficult. Like it was not a good position. I would have not benefited much by sleeping before I went into that section, because it wasn't during the night and I wouldn't have slept well. But it was such a drag getting through that section. But when I finally did get to Schnebly Hill aid station and was able to sleep, I told my crew like 40 minutes, and my pacer really helped me a lot through that section at like starting to believe that just one little nap could totally change the outcome of this race. So when I got through and I slept for 40 minutes, it truly did change my life. That 40-minute nap, when I woke up, like it took a little bit for the junk to get worked out of the legs after sleeping, but I felt brand new. There was no fatigue. My legs felt brand new again. Everything felt, I told my pacer that I feel like I just woke up from a normal night of sleep and I'm going out for a run, and there's like
Gosh,
no mileage. I literally felt like there was no mileage on my legs.
that's wild.
And that was like 190 into this, which therefore led to the chase, which ultimately didn't work. But in terms of gaining a bunch of positions, it didn't work.
Yeah.
But in the overall picture of my whole perspective of the race, the chase is what made Cocodona to me. That having that third wind where I felt amazing again for almost a whole day is what, and it's all, you were talking to speak into the sleep thing. If I'm taking someone to the hotel, and this person that I took to the hotel the year prior, like had serious swelling problems, but like it wasn't for the comfort of the hotel. He was going there because it was a tool he was going to use to try to get him to the finish line. Like he had pushed really hard, so he had a day to spare, and he was just cashing in on.
That's cool. That's so interesting. Yeah, that leads me to just a question that's a little bit kind of along those same veins. So I heard you talk about that you were worried beforehand that at the end of the race, at the end of a lot of your 100 milers, you would have this shutdown of your body and like you'd get super cold. And I can relate to that because I have had at 100Ks and 100 milers, had to go in the medical tent after the race because I start shivering, and I was trying to figure out if it's an electrolyte imbalance, if I have low blood volume, what's going on, and I'll get like very tingly, and I have this whole like basically my body completely shuts down. So you had mentioned that you were worried about that happening in a multi-day when you're going to take a break and go to sleep or something like that. But then it didn't happen in Cocodona, and that led you to believe that it's more of a psychological, like your body, that you're done, and therefore you can basically fall apart. And so during Cocodona, you don't think it happened because you were telling yourself you weren't done with the race, right? So talk a little more about that. That's super interesting. And it's something you were anticipating having to overcome, but you didn't.
Yeah, that is probably one of the most interesting from my perspective, because every time you do something new and crazy and much harder than anything you've ever done, you're going to experience something. Your eyes are going to be open. And to me, that was probably the biggest eye opener of Cocodona, because, I lived out there, I trained out there, like I stated, ate, drank, sleep, dreamed, everything was Cocodona. So there weren't that many surprises that it could throw at me. But that was probably like the biggest one. And it was all when I realized at that moment that it was when, the dots connected. Because yes, it's extremely concerning. The symptoms that I have, you have, same symptoms at the end of a race. We have these very concerning symptoms. And it's like, am I stupid for not going to the hospital, or the questions we're asking ourselves?
Yeah.
But what was such a relief to me was, running Cocodona and giving it all the respect it deserves. Like we were in 90 degrees Fahrenheit during the day. It was in the 30s at night. That is like the perfect that's the perfect ingredients for disaster in terms of like your body retaining heat, and like heat management and body temperature, all the things that you freak out and go wrong at the end of these races. So I was anticipating when I'm trying to sleep at night that my body is going to shut down. I'm going to feel nauseous. I'm going to start to shiver. I'm going to get, cold. All these nasty things that usually there is no, like, you are not coming back from that. And I was very nervous about this hitting me. Whenever I would try to sleep, it would just, whatever, I would be just overcome by these huge obstacles. And like you alluded to, that didn't happen. I slept the first night, didn't happen. Slept a little bit the second day, that didn't happen. Slept the second night, didn't happen. Now, I was very well prepared. I crawled in the back of my Jeep and had my crew crank the heat all the way up so that, try to prevent that. But the funniest thing, when the dots actually started to connect, that this is not, that this is a psychological problem, was that I had that happen at the end of Cocodona. Like on the ride back to my camper in my Jeep, I was like getting all shivery, starting to feel nauseous. Like all of these same symptoms came back to haunt me. And that's when I realized there's no reason in the world that it should happen at 250 miles, 61 hours or whatever. Like, why then? And that's when I realized that my head told my body that it's done, and it took that and ran with it. Like, you give your body an inch, it takes a mile. But wow, that was an experience, an eye-opening
Yeah, on
experience.
a smaller scale, I tell a lot of people that are getting into ultra running, if your expectation is to only run 20 miles that day, running 21 is going to sound hard. But if your expectation is to run 50 miles that day, you're going to feel pretty good at 20 miles. Like, it's just, you have to have that expectation in your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure. I think that's the perfect comparison.
Yeah.
That, I had done 100 miles many times, but I always, when I was done, I was done. And wow, this exact same thing happens at the end of 250 miles. You feel like you can't take another step because you're there. You're
Yeah.
at the finish line.
Yeah. That's crazy. So, okay, we only have a couple more here, but I'm super curious, Arlen, if you feel like you would have done anything different in the race. Now in retrospect, plenty of time removed from it. Do you think you would have had any different strategy? Would you have done anything different? I don't know. Not do you have any regrets? Because I think it played out in this beautiful way. And I mean, you did incredible. You ran, like, 6 people ran under the previous course record, that year. It was insane. But yeah, what would you do different? Do you want to go back and run it again?
Yeah, for sure. I want to go run it again, like, so bad. Partly because, yeah, I would like to have a day where I nail it. But yeah, I think, like, I'm definitely not mad at myself. Because I feel like I made good decisions based on the information that I had.
Mhm.
So I'm very proud of what I did out there. One thing I had alluded to earlier, which ultimately I think cost me the win, was, false information around calorie intake,
Yeah.
around fueling.
Yeah.
But there again, I can't be mad at myself when this was clearly somebody else's fault. But my ultra running tough head says I shouldn't blame anything on anybody else because I am my boss, and I don't want to be, when something's going wrong in a future race, I don't want to even entertain the idea of this being someone else's fault. So I think, yeah, as far as doing things different, of course I would do things differently around the fueling. I would embrace sleep more, even though I'm very happy with what I did, but I would have been more generous with sleep because I now understand that how beneficial it is, but also how good I am at it. Like, some of the
Mhm.
guys that are really good at these, just like, they weigh that out it's very hard for them to weigh out the benefit of sleep because they can't just lay down
Yeah.
and
Shut it off.
be guaranteed that they're going to get a benefit out of that. I mean, there's nothing more frustrating than when you waste 20 minutes trying to sleep. But yeah, I don't, I think if I were to look at, like, what I put into Cocodona and what I got out, I put so much into it to try to compete, and I wouldn't go back and do that any differently. I would totally gun for the win. Um, but yeah, of course, fueling would be different. And then I think on the other hand, if I had nailed my fueling, I wouldn't have the same story. And, like, the whole chase thing, I would have been running in the lead for, like, probably, I never did get to run in the lead, but I would have been a lot further up in day 2. Maybe I wouldn't have had to come back in the chase in day 3. Maybe I would have been zapped on day 3. But when you see the value in the process and the whole story, it's hard to wish for anything else. Would I even trade a win for the experience that I had? Like, would I give up the chase for the win? That would actually be a really hard choice.
Oh man, yeah. I can see that.
And I think we can kind of laugh and I can say this, and then if people go to the theater and watch this movie, they're going to be like, okay, yeah, that would actually be a really hard thing to give. Because right
Yeah.
now, I think like if you release this tomorrow and people would listen to that, they would be like, this guy is just full of it. And then if they watched the movie, they would be like, whoa, that's right. That he was right there.
No, I think that's perfect. And I think we will put it out quickly so that, there'll be some people that maybe have seen it and some people that haven't yet. And people can decide. We'll put a little caveat at the beginning of the episode, you know, decide before listening to this if you'd like to see the movie first or not. There are some things that you can make that choice, but I think you're exactly right. And I almost can feel that same sentiment of like, I've had that experience in a race where it's like, I've raced with someone and thought that I was in X position and finished a race thinking I'm in X position and actually not been in that position. But in retrospect, it was really, really good for me to think that I was getting that because it pushed me harder than I would have, otherwise. And to do that you did it over the course of like a day and a half, it probably just elevates that experience that much more. So I could see the conundrum of that question being very valid.
Well, and so in that
Yeah.
respect, I mean, yeah, I hear in your voice that there is more that you want at Cocodona, but I hope that you can give yourself some grace in terms of still calling that race a success in many ways. Without putting words in your mouth, do you consider your race there in 2024 a success? And how are you feeling about it? In terms of, obviously wanting to go there in the future.
Yeah, I think I probably in many ways already answered that question, because if I'm here deciding trying to decide whether it would be worth giving up the chase or my experience. When I'm talking about the chase, I'm talking about my experience of hanging in third place for a whole day believing I was going to win. And I would rather have that experience than to take the win. I think that probably answers the question, that the value that I put on my experience there. And yeah, coming back, I would be trying to write a different story, because clearly that was not the story I wanted to write. I wanted to write a story of success, of nailing it. But yeah, and of course that's going to be the goal. If I'm coming back and towing the line again, it's like I'm going to try again for the first story that I tried to write. But I think I would take it with a lot more grace, because I would probably go into it expecting more of, no matter what the result is, the experience has a lot more value than the result.
And isn't that just ultra running in a nutshell, everyone?
I
I
think
don't
that's
know
a
if we
great
could end
place
it
to
any
wrap up.
better.
Thank you so much, Arlen. Loved having you here and talking to you about Cocodona and some of your experience. And I think this is now a must listen companion to the going and seeing the Chase movie. So I know I will be doing that tomorrow and probably listening back to some of your words of wisdom here. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It does add a lot of value when you are asked questions like that, because after you've had the experience, it's many times like in that moment, there's so many emotions and everything that you're being confronted with, that you're trying to sort out. And then that's one thing that's so cool about the chase, was I get to relive so much of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I know Dylan was smart in getting you to do your interview when you're in a completely emotional, nothing left, completely stripped state. Like that is a producer and director's way. And so he was very smart to do that. But congratulations. It was an honor, and it was really inspirational to witness your race out there. And I know, everyone's just super excited for you to not only toe the line at Cocodona again, but just be out there in the community again, because you add a lot to it. So thanks so much for being on, Arlen.